what or who are men defending women from? And the answer, of course, is other men.
Should we abandon the idea that women should be defended by men? Marianne, would you lead us off?
Sure. Well, I'd like to start from the premise that in all but one respect, women are absolutely equal to men. Women are just as intelligent as men. If you look at the IQ distribution, women's and men's IQs are identical, except at the very far ends of the bell curve. And if you look at academic achievement, actually girls and young women outperform boys and young men at every stage of the educational process, from kindergarten right through to PhD. So intellectually, we are absolutely men's equals. We're just as competent as men. In fact, lots of studies show that women are more competent than men in certain regards. Houses sold by women tend to raise more, by female estate agents tend to go for higher prices than those sold by male estate agents. Female surgeons are slightly more successful at saving lives than male surgeons. So in lots of respects, women are certainly as good and in some senses better. They also actually make marginally better leaders than men. So one interesting academic study asked subordinates to rate their bosses, and people who worked for female bosses rated them much higher than people who worked for male bosses, though the male bosses rated themselves more highly than the female bosses. And in studies of types of leadership, transformational leadership is seen to be the most successful. Transformational leadership is leadership in which you engage your employees, you are more democratic, less sort of top-down and hierarchical, you inspire them, you listen to them, and women, on the whole, meta-studies show, make better transformational leaders than men. But I did say in all but one respect, and that respect is physical size and strength. And we're never going to change the fact that on average, men are just bigger and stronger than women. Men can rape women, men can kill women, men can beat up women. In any hand-to-hand combat, it's very likely that the man will win. And I know personally, I feel much safer walking home from the tube with my husband at night than I do walking on my own. And I'm very happy for him to defend me in those circumstances. I just, feel much more protected and much more safe when my husband is there with me, as I would probably with almost any man. I feel much less vulnerable to attack. And we're never going to be able to change that. But beyond that, I want to recast the notion of men defending women from a sort of rather old-fashioned, chivalric, patriarchal notion to a much more modern one. Men as allies of women. Now, in the book I've recently written, The Authority Gap, I talk about all sorts of behavior that happens routinely to women, however senior they are, in work contexts and also in social contexts, which is women being underestimated, being patronized, being interrupted and talked over, having their ideas ignored in favor of men's, having their expertise challenged, and having their authority resisted. And this is a sort of behavior that I would really like to change. It's only going to happen if men change their behavior and men start acting as allies to women. And in that sense, I would love men to defend us. And beyond just the authority gap behavior when it comes to the gender pay gap and much worse things such as sexual harassment, violence against women, calling names, sort of sexist behavior on the street, public offences. I would like other men to say to men who display this sort of sexist and misogynist behavior, this is no longer acceptable. In other words, to defend us against continuing sexism in society. And my view is that it's very similar to racism. So if you look back 10 or 20 years, it was quite common, though horrible, in a group of white people for a white person to make a casually racist joke. That is no longer common, because the other white people will say, oh, I'm not putting up with that. That is no longer acceptable. You can't do that anymore. And so I would like, in groups of men, if they see any sort of sexist or misogynist behaviour taking place, that they call it out. And that's a sort of defence that I would like to see from men, for me as a woman, that they start saying to other men, this is as unacceptable as racism, and then the old-fashioned sexist dinosaurs will feel just as marginalised as racists do today.
Thanks very much indeed, Marianne. A very clear exposition of that opening position. Could we turn to you, Minna, and this question of should we abandon the idea that women should be defended, definitely not defeated, undefeated in every way, defended by men. Please.
Of course.
Hasty recovery.
Women should defeat men, maybe. Should women be defended by men? So 2 things that I want to say about that. The first is, I think the question is very revealing of how we think about men defending women, especially in terms of war. So embedded into the question is the idea that men actually go to war in order to defend women. And the follow-up question from that is, what or who are men defending women from? And the answer, of course, is other men. And if that is true, that men are defending women from other men, then it is also true that women live in patriarchal societies, which of course then means that, yes, on some level, women do need to be defended from the societies in which we live. But the question, I think, is also, and importantly, especially telling of how we continue to erase women from history, because women are not actually defended by men, even in war situations. So women suffer disproportionately from war. Wars exacerbate inequality, both during the war and after the war. They increase rape, obviously, sex trafficking, domestic violence. So what exactly is it that women are being defended from at the end of the day? And secondly, the erasure of women from history and from our current narratives happens when we frame the question in this way, because women actually defend themselves. Women have always done that. Women have always fought in wars. So even in Ukraine today, I don't think there's an accurate estimate yet, because the war is still ongoing, but about 30,000 of the soldiers in Ukraine were women. These are tens of thousands of people who are in combat. So these women are defending their country. You know, it's not men who are defending women. I Googled the word soldier in preparation for this discussion, and I had to scroll through countless pages before a single image of a female soldier came up. So, you know, we're completely erasing the fact that women are in combat and have been for very long. King Charles I, he actually had to create a law that said that women were not allowed to dress as men, because so many women were dressing as men in order to go into combat. In the UK, it's not until 2015 that during David Cameron's rule, that women were allowed to enter combative roles in the UK army. So women have been banned from defending themselves, but that doesn't mean that they haven't done so. So ultimately, and I also want to add, you know, of course, you know, women have not only defended themselves in combat in armies. If you look at black women's history, you have slave revolts that took place throughout the centuries. These are ways of women engaging in fighting. So yeah, men don't defend women. They defend the idea of the male hero who defends women.
Minna, thanks very much indeed. And let me turn now to address this question of should we abandon the idea that women should be defended by men to Maya Oppenheim. Maya.
Hello everyone. So yeah, should we abandon the idea that women should be defended by men? I mean, yeah, I find that a paternalistic, condescending view to take. You know, it casts women as de facto children, as second-class citizens. But saying that, you know, if another human being sees another human being, you know, being attacked or in any way harmed, I do think they should stand up for them. But I'm going to look at this question in relation to war, because that seems to be, you know, the main crux of the debate. So the notion that men, you know, the majority of people that make up military positions are men, you know, it is women that are more likely to stay home in situations of conflict. The notion that that is the case because men are out defending women, yeah, I don't agree with that. That feels very erroneous. I would say it is because we've got dependents in society. We've got children, you know, babies and children who without someone to look after them will die. The best person to stay home to look after them, the person that, you know, is going to, their presence will result in the child having, you know, least trauma, will be the parent. Often the mother is closer to the child, so it makes sense for the mother to stay home. We still live in a society where the burden of unpaid labour falls heavily on women. Women are far more likely to take on the lion's share of childcare, to look after elderly, sick relatives. I think that, you know, I'm against forcing conscription on women. Given we live in a grossly unequal society, it will just deepen and entrench already existing inequality. You know, women are subjected to grave human rights abuses around the world. Women already disproportionately suffer during war. There are so many, you know, facts I can tell you to back this up. But yeah, I think that, you know, as you've said, global gender-based violence increases. Also, women and girls are overrepresented in populations that are displaced by war. Women often, you know, women are physically more vulnerable in the sense that, you know, women get pregnant. Women are reliant on contraception, abortions. These things do not stop in a conflict zone. Also, the fact that, you know, 70% of those that die in modern war are civilians. Many of these are women and children. So yeah, my conclusion would be, if we lived in a gender equal society, well, I think there would be less wars, but if we did live in a gender equal society, I would believe in conscription for men and for women. But given we don't, then conscription for both will just deepen pre-existing inequalities.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.